The wind came down from the mountains like a living thing, carrying dust, the smell of distant rain, and the echo of gunfire that no longer sounded real. Nita ran until her lungs felt carved from stone. Behind her, the canyon swallowed sound. Smoke drifted upward in thin gray ribbons where her band had been only an hour before. She did not look back again. Looking back made it real. Looking back meant accepting that her brother would not rise, that her uncle's voice would not call her name through the juniper trees. The world had narrowed to breathe and pain. She stumbled over a wash of broken rock and slid down into a shallow ravine, scraping her palms bloody. Her left side burned where something hot and violent had torn through flesh. She pressed her hand there and felt warmth slicking her fingers. Blood, the cavalry had come before dawn. She had woken to the horse's first iron, shod hooves striking hard earth, and then the rifles. Chaos split the morning in two. She remembered Smoke, shouting in English, her mother pushing her toward the back of their shelter. Run, her mother had said, run and do not stop. So she ran, but now the running was ending. Her legs folded beneath her, and she slumped against the cool wall of the ravine. The sky above was too bright. The pain in her side pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Each breath tasted of iron. She tried to stay awake. She pressed dirt into the wound, the way she had seen done before, but her hands shook too badly. The world tilted. Somewhere far off, a horse snorted. She stiffened. The sound came again, closer this time. Hooves descending carefully along the ridge. A man's low murmur to calm the animal. Nita's first instinct was to crawl deeper into shadow. She dragged herself against the ravine wall, heart hammering, fingers grasping at dry roots. If it was one of them, she would not beg. The horse appeared at the edge of the ravine, outlined against the sky. A bay gelding, dust, coated and steady. Then the rider. He wore no blue coat. His hat cast his face in shadow, but she saw the stubble along his jaw, the sunburned skin, the worn leather of his jacket. A rifle hung from his saddle, but it was slung carelessly, not raised. He looked down and saw her. For a long moment neither of them moved. She expected his hand to go for the rifle. It did not. Instead, he swung down from the saddle slowly, as though approaching a wounded animal that might bolt. "I ain't with them," he said. His voice was rough, cautious, not shouted, not sharp. She did not answer. He stepped closer, boots sliding on loose rock. When he saw the blood soaking her buckskin dress, his expression changed. Something like alarm flickered there. "You're hurt bad," he said. She drew a knife from the sheath at her calf and held it in trembling fingers. "Easy," he murmured, palms lifting slightly. "Easy now." Her arm wavered. She did not have the strength to lunge. He studied her for another heartbeat, then crouched slowly a few feet away. "Name's Thomas," he said. "Tom, mostly." She swallowed. The canyon swayed. "Why are you here?" Came across the smoke. Figured something had gone wrong. His jaw tightened. Looks like it did. Silence stretched between them. He glanced at her side again. Blood was still seeping steadily. "If I don't stop that," he said carefully, "you're going to bleed out." She understood enough English to know what that meant. "I don't need your help," she whispered. "That may be," he replied gently, "but you need someone's." Her knife dipped lower. He moved closer now, slow as dusk, and she flinched but did not strike. When he reached out, he paused inches from her shoulder. "May I?" he asked. The question startled her more than the sight of him. No one had asked her permission in hours. Her vision blurred. She nodded once. He set his hat aside and pulled a canteen from his belt. He poured water over his hands first, rubbing away dust. Then he carefully lifted the torn fabric at her side. The bullet had grazed but dug deep before exiting. The flesh was torn, angry, and still bleeding freely. Tom exhaled through his teeth. "All right," he muttered. "All right." From his saddlebag he drew a small tin and a needle wrapped in cloth. He held the needle up to the light. Nita stiffened. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice thin. "Gonna clean it. Then I need to stitch it shut." Her eyes widened. He met her gaze steadily. "If I don't, you'll lose too much blood. Infection'll take you even if the bleeding doesn't." She stared at the needle in his hand. He saw fear bloom across her face and hesitated. "I know it ain't pleasant," he said quietly, "but it's better than dying out here." She shook her head weakly as he threaded the needle with practiced fingers. When he moved closer, holding the needle toward her side, panic flared. "Wait, you're putting that inside me," she gasped, recoiling. His eyes softened, just through the skin. He said, "To pull it together, I won't go deeper than I have to." She trembled, caught between terror and the growing cold that seeped into her limbs. He poured whiskey over the wound. She cried out as fire spread across her side, fingers clawing into dirt. "I know," he murmured, "I know." Then the needle pierced her skin. The pain was sharp and immediate, but not the killing kind. Not like the bullet. She bit down on her sleeve to stop herself from screaming. He worked steadily, hands sure despite the wind tugging at his jacket. Stitch after stitch drew the torn flesh together. She watched him through a haze of tears. His brow was furrowed in concentration. Sweat trickled along his temple. He looked nothing like the men who had fired into her camp. When he finished, he tied off the thread and pressed clean cloth against the wound. "There," he said softly, "that'll hold." Her body sagged. Exhaustion washed over her like nightfall. "You can't stay here," he said after a moment. "They may come back." Her eyes flicked toward the ridge. He stood and offered his hand. "I've got a cabin a few miles north. It's quiet country. You can heal there." She stared at his hand as though it were a snake. "I won't hurt you," he said. "You already did." She whispered. He did not flinch from that truth. "I know," he said. "But I saved your life too." The canyon was growing darker. Vultures circled high above, patient. She knew she could not walk alone. She could not even stand without swaying. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. His grip was firm but careful, as though she might break. When he lifted her onto the horse, he turned his head away to give her modesty as he adjusted her position. Then he mounted behind her, steadying her with one arm around her shoulders. She stiffened at the contact, but did not pull away. The ride was long and blurred. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the rhythm of the horse and the warmth of the man behind her. Once she woke to find his hand pressed against her bandaged side, keeping pressure on the wound as they climbed a rocky incline. At last they reached a small cabin tucked between cottonwoods beside a narrow stream. He dismounted first, then lifted her down gently. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and smoke. A single bed stood against one wall, a table against another. He laid her on the bed and set about building up the fire. She watched him with heavy eyes. "Why?" she asked when he returned with fresh water. He paused. "Why what? Why help me?" He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "Because I've seen enough dying." That was all he said. The fever came that night. She thrashed beneath rough blankets, whispering in her own language, reliving gunfire and smoke. Tom sat beside her, changing cloths on her forehead, forcing sips of water between her clenched teeth. Once, in her delirium, she shoved him weakly and cried out, "Don't touch me." He backed away instantly, hands raised, waiting until the storm passed. Near dawn, the fever broke. She woke to gray light filtering through the small window. He was asleep in a chair beside the bed, chin resting on his chest. She studied him. Without his hat and dust, he looked younger, tired. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into sun and wind. She shifted carefully. Pain flared, but it was duller now. He woke at the sound. For a moment confusion clouded his face, then relief. "You're still here," he said quietly. She did not know whether that was meant for her or for himself. Days passed in cautious peace. He kept his distance unless tending the wound. Each time he asked before touching her. Each time she nodded more quickly. She learned his routines. He rose before sunrise, fed the horse, checked the traps by the creek. He spoke little, but when he did, it was plain and honest. She told him her name on the third day. "Nita," she said. He nodded. "Nita." He repeated carefully. On the fifth day she sat up without help. On the seventh she stood by the doorway and looked out at the trees, half expecting soldiers to burst through the underbrush. None came. The world beyond the cabin remained vast and indifferent. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she asked him, "Were you there?" He knew what she meant. "No," he said. "I ride alone. Don't answer to the army." "Why not?" He stared at the flames, used to, long time ago. She waited. "They burned a village once," he said finally. "Said it was necessary. I believed it." His jaw tightened. "Turned out it wasn't. Silence filled the cabin. I left after that." He finished. She considered him anew. Pain and regret sat on him like a second coat. Trust did not come easily, but something like understanding did. Weeks later, when she could walk without swaying, she stood beside him at the stream. "You could leave," he said quietly. "Head north, find your people." She looked at the water sliding over stone. "My people are gone," she replied. He had no answer for that. Wind stirred the cottonwood leaves above them. "You saved my life," she said. He shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have." "No," she said gently, "they would not." He met her eyes then. The canyon where they had first seen each other felt very far away. The memory of the needle, the fear, the pain, it had become something else now. Not violation, but salvation. She reached out slowly and took his hand. This time he did not ask permission. He simply held on.